Welcome to Industry Beacon, where we shine a light on the trailblazers, the disruptors, the titans of industry shaping our future. We're not just talking about success stories here. We're diving deep into their hearts and minds to see what drives them. I'm Mike Yoreta. Today, we'll take a look at the automotive industry in the Philippines, a sector that drives the economy forward, fuels job creation, infrastructure development, and export revenue. But just like any other industry, the auto sector faces its own set of challenges. How is it navigating these hurdles and steering towards a sustainable future? Join us as we explore the road ahead for the Philippine automotive sector. Buckle up as we drive through the Philippine automotive industry with Vince Socco, the chairman of GT Capital Auto and Mobility Holdings Incorporated, who brings with him decades of experience and expertise in the sector. He'll be joining us in a few minutes. Don't go away. Industry Beacon will be right back. Welcome back. You're still watching Industry Beacon. Here with us in the studio is car enthusiast par excellence, a true captain of industry, Vince Socco. He is the chairman of GT Capital Auto and Mobility Holdings. Good morning, Vince.
Good morning, Mikey. Thanks for having me today.
We're so glad to have you with us, Vince.
I'm glad to be here.
You are truly a captain of this industry, 40 years in it. How did you get started?
I've been asking myself the same question because when I started with the automotive industry 40-some years ago, I said I'd be there for 5 years. It was one of those periods in time where 5-year plans and 10-year plans were all the rage. And I said, let me try it out for 5 years, and this has turned out to be the longest 5 years of my life.
And you stuck with it, with the same company at that. 19 years when you first started with Toyota Philippines, 18 years with the regional office for Asia in Singapore, 3 of which were in the global headquarters in Japan. And in 2019, you came back to the Philippines to join GT Capital, which is the majority partner of Toyota in the Philippines.
Correct.
What was your first job at Toyota?
Well, I started off as a marketing assistant out of college, and there's an interesting story behind that, because when I was starting to look for jobs, I went to the school bulletin board and looked for job postings, and there was a small sign about this big that said marketing assistant with Delta Motor, the then distributor for Toyota. And so I turned to my left and I turned to my right, and I took the sign off so I wouldn't have any competition for the job. Don't announce the secret's out.
Smart move. Okay, so fresh out of college, you took up business and economics at UP Diliman. Your first job was at Delta Motor Corporation, then the distributor of Toyota Philippines as the marketing assistant. What got you interested in the automotive industry, and what keeps you in it 40 years plus?
Probably the right answer people would think is it's the cars. But actually, for me, it's always been about the people. For me, the automotive industry is more than just about the cars. It's about the lives we move, the people we move every day, taking them to work, taking them to school, taking them to the hospital, to the church. It's just such an interesting field because you meet all sorts of people from all walks of life. And it's never the same every day. It's just been something different every day, and it's just been so interesting. 40-some years later, I'm still so engaged, so fascinated at what we can learn.
Engaged and enthusiastic about it. Looking back 4 decades into this, what has changed and what has stayed the same?
Well, actually, it's kind of like when I first joined the industry back in the early 80s, I was really fascinated because in the Philippines, we had what it took to build a car. We had an engine plant, we had a stamping plant, we had a transmission plant, we had factories. We had a good number of international car makers who were operating here in the Philippines. We had a progressive car manufacturing program, which was really an outstanding program of government that initiated and incentivized local manufacturing. It was a great time for the industry. Unfortunately, we were overtaken by political events and economic upheavals in the years succeeding, and the industry died. So the market shrank, and there was not really enough for the industry to keep manufacturing. So the manufacturing operations went away. But since then, the industry has started to grow again. And last year, the industry hit a really milestone sales level with 438,000 units. And this year, we're on track to exceed our historical highest sales level, which was set back in 2017.
Yeah.
Now the makers, there's so many more makers. Like at last count, there were probably almost 40 international car brands in the market today. And that's really good for the consumer because then they really have so much more choices. But in all of that, I'm really happy that Toyota has been a partner from then until now. And we are really committed to stay with the Filipino people building cars here in the Philippines.
You mentioned numbers, and you mentioned, growth for what's good for the consumer. Speaking of what's good for the consumer, interest rates are coming down.
Yeah.
The BSP already started with a 25 basis point cut, and the trajectory, as in the U.S., is for interest rates to continue going down, which means that borrowing costs are going to come down, which means that more people will go for auto loans. That said, in the first half, the CAMPI, the Chamber of Automotive Manufacturers in the Philippines, reported sales were up 10%. With this looser stance on monetary policy and more people, being able to afford cars, how do you expect to finish the year, 2024?
Yeah, the forecast for the year was put at 470,000. That's about a 7% growth from last year. But at the present trajectory, it's likely and it's possible that it might even hit the 500,000. The president of the Chamber of Automotive Manufacturers said as much, 500,000. Is it possible? It looks like it is because there's still some tailwinds that are coming in the second half. As you mentioned, the cuts in interest rate, that should spur up more economic activity as it is with the economy growing at 6.3% in the last quarter. That's the highest in the last 15 months.
It looks like we can do it. And everything that's happening now is setting the stage for a stronger 2025. So do you expect double-digit growth in 2025 on account of these changes in the economic landscape?
Well, the double digits I'm not sure of because anyway, the base is getting higher. So the percentage growth might be not in the double digits range. But certainly what's very compelling is that the auto industry market is growing. And when the pie grows, that's always good. And the Philippines, on its way to being a upper middle income economy, is really increasing in our ability to purchase cars. And we are just at the cusp of motorization. One study I saw a couple of years back, but it showed that per 1,000 people, the Philippines has only an car ownership of about 50. Compare that with Thailand, which has a ownership level of about 300 per 1,000 people. That's still a long runway for the Philippine automotive industry because we are the youngest population in the region with only a 26-year-old median age. The economy is expected to grow 5.5%, 6% in the coming years. There's motorization, we're building more roads. There's so much that's really going to drive the growth of mobility in this country.
You mentioned Thailand, Vince. Toyota has factories in Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. But what's interesting to note that is what has become the Detroit of Asia is Thailand. Why is that? Why is Thailand the Detroit of Asia? And what can we do to get a bigger piece of that pie here in the Philippines in terms of manufacturing?
Yeah, I would argue that the Philippines was the Detroit of Asia before Thailand became the Detroit of Asia. But unfortunately, because of the turn events, Thailand has taken over that. And Thailand put up a program, which I'd like to say was to a large part a result of the Thai government study of the Philippines' progressive car manufacturing program. So they looked at our blueprint and did it better in Thailand. And that caused a lot of international car makers to locate in Thailand. And with each car maker, they brought their own set of local parts manufacturers, and they really grew that ecosystem. And the market in Thailand was growing in leaps and bounds. And for any automotive company, volume is key, especially for production, because that drives economies of scale.
Now we need to take a page from them.
Absolutely.
In terms of building the proper ecosystem for this industry to flourish in the Philippines, in terms of regulations, framework, incentives. How can we make it more enticing in the Philippines for foreign car makers?
Well, I think the program of government really should encourage more local manufacturing. I think this is part of the long-term national economic development program of the Philippines, where the manufacturing sector is expected to be a stronger second leg to the service sector. Right now, the service sector accounts for about 65% of GDP. The manufacturing sector only accounts for 15 to 17%. So it's not a healthy position for the economy. So to grow manufacturing, the government should put more programs in place that entices makers to locate here in the Philippines. And in that respect, there's still a ways to go insofar as getting the Philippines to be a competitive base for production. Our costs for production are still on the high side. But beyond that, I think what will invite more makers to come into the Philippines is really, again, that trajectory of growth that I think is inevitably going to happen, because the demand for cars will keep growing. There's just so much behind that. And where there's demand, supply comes to fit in.
Yeah, and then and now, you know, this auto industry is still a vital source of manufacturing. It's still a vital sector for the economy.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, the Toyota Philippines, in our whole ecosystem, at our factories, at our offices, at our dealers, and our suppliers, we are providing jobs for about 69,000 people. In the last 36 years since we've been operating here in the country, we've paid about almost 500 billion pesos of various taxes, duties, and other tariffs to the government. So we've contributed to the coffers. And in terms of exports, since 1997 to last year, we were able to export about 20 billion US dollars worth of automotive parts and components. So, you know, we think there's really such a huge potential, and we would like to continue to contribute to the economy as much as we can.
Yeah, especially in Toyota, you already are. I mean, in terms of market share, Toyota, to date, that's what, 46% of the market? Who are the other key players, and what has been the secret to Toyota's dominance in the Philippine auto industry?
Well, I think the most important thing that we bring to the table is Toyota has always had a good ear to listen to what it is the consumers want in terms of their vehicles, how they get around, what kind of mobility solutions they need. Toyota has constantly taken the time to understand and build cars that fit those needs. Today, we're very happy to have the widest selection of products, from hatchbacks, sedans, minivans, pickups, SUVs. Every segment, we've built a car to meet the Filipino needs. And I think that's key. We have to be able to grow in tandem with our customers. We can't get ahead of them. We can't fall behind them. The other key players here is Mitsubishi. Mitsubishi is there are only two of us who still produce cars locally, so it's us and Mitsubishi. Mitsubishi has about a 20% share of the market, so they're the second biggest player.
All right, it's interesting. Let's also talk about the rise of electric vehicles in the country. You know, there is a shift to this in this direction globally. And for the Philippines, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when we can catch up, right? Can you talk to us about the rise in the demand for electric vehicles in the country?
Yeah, I think electrification or electrified mobility is really the way of the future. There's no two ways about it. But I think every time the topic of electrified mobility comes up, the first thing I always want to ask is, let's try to understand and recall why the need to electrify mobility is happening. And that really falls back to our desire to combat carbon emissions. Our goal is to achieve carbon neutrality. And we have to win our fight and save our planet Earth. That's why we need to go to electrified mobility. And that's taken off, and there's no putting back that genie in the bottle. It's out there, it is the solution. So now it's just a matter of when it's going to happen, how fast the transition and adoption will happen, but it will happen.
Okay, interesting. Another question is, you know, the push is to go green, right, with the electric vehicles. But in a country like the Philippines, where our power is, you know, fueled by coal-fired plants, are we even really going green? We're just changing the source of the pollution. Yeah. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think, again, that goes back to the why of things. So if the real intention is to fight carbon emissions, then we certainly have to make power generation a part of the solution. So by reducing emissions from the tailpipe and driving them to the oil, back to the oil wells or power generation plants, that's just pushing the problem back. But the thing is, there is no two ways about it. We have to develop the technology so that we can be a precursor of that solution and bring cleaner mobility into the country. There are different ways. There's the hybrid electric vehicle, the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, battery electric, fuel cells. There's a whole range of different electrified mobility solutions. So I think it's about, Toyota believes in having a multi-pathway. There are different ways to get to the same end. And so the policy in our fight for carbon neutrality should be an inclusive one. It should embrace all sorts of technologies that contribute to the solution of the problem. And step by step, we'll get there. Toyota has sold 22.5 million hybrid electric vehicles since 2007. Also, since 2007 with the introduction of the Prius, or is it 1997? That has reduced emissions equivalent to what 7.5 million battery electric vehicles will have produced, will have saved. So really, we're really trying our best to solve this problem and keep going at it. And having the technology evolve is part of the whole game.
Well, things will only get better. Another thing that's a hurdle for electric vehicles is affordability, because they tend to cost 20 to 30, sometimes even 50% more than the internal combustion engine type vehicles. What can we do to make this more affordable? And then there's the issue of practicability. All of these cars, all of these electric vehicles are gonna need charging ports. How? I mean, you know, we have 2 EVs in our household. It was a challenge to even create the charging ports for that. And even then, to how many can you have in your house? And what if you live in a condo? How are you gonna have an EV?
Well, those are real challenges. But I think the good thing is people are starting to address them. The awareness that the problem exists is the first step to having a solution for that. The government itself has decided that electrified mobility is the way forward. They enacted the EVIDA law, the Electric Vehicle Industry Development Act, recently, and then in line with that, the comprehensive roadmap for electric vehicle industry was rolled out. And it's very clear that the electric vehicles will be a part of our future of mobility. And affordability, the biggest problem with electric vehicles is the cost of the battery. That's the single biggest. It accounts for about 30% of the cost of a vehicle. So the point is how to reduce that cost of the battery. And it has come down, really, from when electric vehicles first came onto the scene. No? Another way that affordability is being incentivized, or ownership is being incentivized, is through the exemption of import tariffs for electric vehicles here in the Philippines. So if you're a hybrid electric vehicle or a plug-in electric or battery electric, you can bring in the vehicles here tariff-free. And that brings the price down and more affordable.
All right, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us, Vince. So much to talk about in this space.
Yeah, this sure is.
But we have a finite amount of time, so we'll have to leave it at that. We'll just have to invite you over again for another discussion on this.
Give me a call.
All right.
Thank you.
Vince Socco, the chairman of GT Capital Auto and Mobility Holdings. And with that, we wrap up this episode with a view that the Philippine automotive industry is evolving rapidly, constantly adapting to global challenges while fueling economic growth and technological advancement. This sector is truly driving forward. And that's it for today's show. I'm Mikey Oreta. Catch the Bilyonaryo News Channel on Free TV Channel 31 and on cable by Signal Channel 24. Thanks for watching the Bilyonaryo News Channel, always on top.